All right. Welcome, everyone, to today's stream. Lots of questions already, as I see. But for today's stream, we're going to have myself, William McKenzie of Tezos Commons, and also Oliver Simon of Blockwatch Data as your co-host. Our guest today is Daniel Masters of CoinShares and the Tezos Foundation Council. Daniel and Oliver, how are you guys doing?
Great.
Great. It's a pleasure to be here.
Good to be here.
Awesome. Yeah, so before we start, Oliver, would you like to talk about the giveaway that we're doing?
Yeah, sure. So before we kick off the session, let me just mention that we'll be having a Tezos branded ledger to give away. And later in the show, I'll be announcing a giveaway word. And basically, you just got to enter it into the chat to participate. And we'll be choosing a random winner later on that I'll also be announcing. So make sure to participate if you want to win it.
Yeah,
Can we just clarify? Can we just clarify if speakers are allowed to enter in that competition? Because I'd definitely be interested.
Unfortunately, not.
Okay.
But yeah, let's just go ahead and kick things off with you, Daniel. Can you give us all a bit more info about your background and I guess your journey through the blockchain space?
That'd be my pleasure, Will. And thanks to everyone for tuning in. Hopefully we'll get through some interesting conversation. I have a background in science, physics, and statistics. I spent a dozen years on Wall Street working for both JP Morgan and Salomon Brothers. I started my own commodities hedge fund in 1999 when I went independent. And that fund was two funds actually very successfully run through the commodity super cycle, which sort of petered out in 2012, 2013. And I happened upon Bitcoin, which was very fortunate. If you fast forward to today, I'm the chairman of CoinShares. CoinShares is Europe's largest digital asset manager. We operate in many jurisdictions, the United States, Sweden, Switzerland, the UK, Channel Islands, and Asia. We have several verticals in our business. The two most important ones are our exchange-traded note programs that offer investors that don't have access to crypto markets or are more traditionally inclined or are wrapped within pension type structures, access to crypto. And that's through two companies. We have XBT Provider and CoinShares Digital Securities. We have over $4 billion invested in those two vehicles, and those two families of funds currently, making us second only to Grayscale in terms of investor capital. And I think we hold about 0.5% of all the crypto in the world right now.
Oh, wow.
We also are very large market makers. We did something like $10 billion US equivalent of market making in 2020. That pace of volume increase, which was 500% up 2019 over 2020 over 2019, is probably going to mirror itself in 2021 the way it looks. We're also active in the venture capital business. We own stakes in about 20 companies. We have a great team of people that look across the ecosystem at all kinds of opportunities in, you name it, mining, wallet infrastructure, market making technology, data, custody, derivatives. We look at all these things. We own parts of, a number of businesses of that kind. We are an issuer of a gold-backed stablecoin, which is called DGLD, Digital Gold. And that has a wrapped Ethereum version, WDGLD. And we also have a very interesting indexation business. And we've launched one of the first European benchmark regulated gold and cryptocurrency indices, which has a lot of appeal as a kind of a gateway investment into crypto for people that don't want all of the volatility of crypto, but might be in the gold business and want a little bit more volatility than they currently have. We have a big research function. I think Chris Bennigsen, who is our sort of head Bitcoin analyst, is very well known across the space and extremely knowledgeable. We publish a lot of research on, just did 3 pieces on Bitcoin valuation, which have been extremely popular. We publish a weekly flows report that details all the investor inflows into crypto from institutions. That's becoming one of the most read publications in the crypto space. And finally, we are co-owners of a company called Kamenu. And Kamenu is a licensed digital asset depository and custodian. It's a joint venture between us, Nomura, the Japanese bank, and Ledger from the Ledger Nano world. And that business is, took about 2 years to build before we got all the regulatory permissions and technology straight, processes and so on. And that's been live now for about 9 months. It's doing extremely well. And we're about 65 people across the world, and it's a fun place to work. Just flipping to Tezos, I was in this space obviously quite early. I mean, as a financial person, I was very, very early. I think only myself and Dan Moorhead attended the 2014 Amsterdam Bitcoin Foundation conference as financial people. The rest were technology guys. So we were very early to the space. And the main reason I was attracted to Tezos, and I participated purely in a blind personal capacity in the ICO, was it occurred to me that for those of you that were around, I'm sure many of you were back in those days, there was a huge amount of controversy around the governance of the Bitcoin Core protocol. And we had all these forks and all these fights and these rage quits and claims and counterclaims, and it just became extremely fractious. So when I saw Tezos come along, it just was the first blockchain project. I mean, there weren't many around in those days. This is kind of you forget that when there's a blockchain week kind of popping up at the moment. But it was I thought a very interesting approach, because there needed to be some more adults in the room when it came to the governance around these protocols. And obviously also with Tim Draper, backing the project, that was, a high profile and respectable sort of financier from the United States getting involved as well. So I got involved in the ICO, and that was, it was a really remarkable one. I mean, Kathleen and Arthur, I think they were looking originally for somewhere between $25 and $50 million, but it's one of the first ICOs that wasn't capped. And so they didn't cap it. And the next thing you know, there were $250 million of subscriptions. They accepted those. And then, of course, after that, the foundation to which the money went, the foundation on which I now serve as a council member, got into all sorts of problems, which we probably don't need to go into. But the net result was that those tokens became essentially, or that value essentially became frozen. The project, was under a lot of pressure. And it took a long time to sort that out. That's all water under the bridge at this point in time. And while that was going on, I got to know Kathleen and Arthur. And I originally met them at a conference in Switzerland. And I got to know them and liked them very much. We talked a lot about the problems they were having on the legal perspective with the governance of the foundation. I gave them a little bit of advice. We offered them a little bit of funding, which they didn't accept, but I think it sort of was comforting at the time. And the whole sort of governance issue around, Johan gave us the former chair of the council, who's a bad actor, that all got sorted out. And the good news was that because the funds had been frozen, they benefited from a huge appreciation. And that's now led to the Tezos Foundation being, a very significant pool of capital in terms of, the ecosystem. And it's sort of almost more by luck than judgment. But that's where we are today. And I've come to know Arthur and Kathleen very closely. They approached me about a year ago and asked me if I would bring, some of my experience to the council, which I've done. So I sit at the top level in the foundation. I also sit on a couple of the subcommittees, and it's been a very interesting learning experience for me. And I think I've been able to bring a lot of useful perspective to the foundation, both from my crypto experience, but also from my governance and financial experience prior to crypto. I think that unless you have any other questions, Will. I think that covers my intro.
Yeah, no, I think that's very interesting to hear about all your experience and that induction with Kathleen and Arthur. But we have a ton of questions. So I guess before we get to those questions, I'd like to ask you, where do you kind of see crypto today?
What a business to be in at the moment. I mean, this is really electric. It's the only way you can describe it at the moment. I think there's too much focus at the moment on actually short-term stuff. Do I care if Michael Saylor buys another $1 billion of Bitcoin? Do I care if Jack Dorsey, buys Dogecoin? Do I care if the Federal Reserve, taper or don't taper or quantitatively ease or tighten? Yes, I do. All those things, is there more stimulus? This will all drive crypto. The next billionaire to buy, the next tech company to adopt is all going to drive crypto. But this is stuff I would describe as very cyclical. It's not secular, and it's very short. So this could all change in a month, right? But I think what people need to keep their eyes on is the future. Where we're going, and there are many, there are many use cases for crypto. I just tend to focus on the financial use cases, but in the financial use cases, we're going to an entirely new world, and it's a world that was promised in 2017 and not delivered, and the lack of delivery caused the prices to drop so much in 2017. But this stuff is really here now. The traditional finance system, in simplest form, works on a 3-layer system. You have electronic money that's issued by central banks that flows down to commercial banks who provide services such as borrowing, lending, hypothecation, derivatives, cross-chain interoperability from one payment system to another, custody, and so on. And then beneath them, you have a bunch of bank customers that are customers of HSBC or Barclays or whomsoever. We're going to a new system which is going to be 3-layered as well. There'll be digitization at the top. There's already 1.3 trillion of digital assets. You throw in central bank digital currencies, which are coming, it's going to be 5 trillion, 10 trillion of digital assets. So the top of that funnel is going to be very full. In the middle, what central banks don't do is handle customers. So they leave that to the commercial banks. The commercial banks aren't going to be there. So these driverless banking features are either going to operate individually or they're going to be rolled up into some other sort of macro layer, combined with some sort of fiduciary. Could be a Coinbase, could be Fidelity, could be a Google, who knows. And that's going to be the new version of a commercial bank. And then the users may well operate. That's a fascinating question for me. Is the third layer, the bottom layer, the users. How do they interface with these electronic assets, these digital assets, these CBDCs, and these banking services? And is it going to be a Coinbase wallet? Is it going to be a Binance wallet? Who knows? Is it going to be blockchain.com who get taken out by Google? Is it going to be their wallet? Is it going to be Amazon who come out of the woods? The most obvious choice right now is Facebook, because at 1.8 million unique wallet operations in Bitcoin and 1.8 billion unique operations in Facebook. Were you to have a digital wallet in Facebook, you could arguably bootstrap digital wallet adoption by 1,000 times in a day by rolling that out. And so 5 years from now, I see a future where the digitization bucket is very full, and we digitize lots of currencies, lots of native assets, lots of stocks, bonds, and commodities. That there is this middle layer where all these products and services. I mean, think about the companies that are doing unbelievably well: Aave, Maker, Synthetics, Uniswap, SushiSwap, Compound Finance, DYDX. They're doing all the things banks do. And you could see a company like Coinbase after its IPO sucking up a bunch of governance tokens or a bunch of equity in these companies or replicating them, and you're going to have a $70 billion bank, which will be the 5th biggest bank in the United States, that is a truly digital bank. And then who knows who owns the wallets? I mean, maybe you've seen these real endpoints. Sort of, I have DannyMasters.eth. That's my endpoint, and as more and more digital assets can be pointed to my name, maybe I don't even need a wallet. Maybe that endpoint just becomes unique to me. But that's how I see the future. I don't think banks have any idea what's coming. And these companies that I've been talking about are no longer proof of concept. They are multi-billion-dollar companies in a lot of cases, and they're doing way more volume than people understand, especially the banks don't understand. So this is the exciting future. That's what I see for crypto. That's the kind of vision that actually will transcend any short-term market moves.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there. It's a great time for crypto. I mean, it's been such an explosive year, start to the year anyways, and all eyes on the space right now. And
yeah,
I really think thinking over like a long-term perspective here, it really has kind of come from this fringe phenomenon and now that is attracting the big players. And I guess we've all been kind of impressed by this recent rise of DeFi.
yeah.
And if you think about DeFi and enabling this sort of transformation that you were just talking about, which is basically like bringing the entire space from this short-term play that it's been in the past to the long-term play that we are, seeing now. To me, Tezos is in an interesting position when it comes to that, because the entire focus of the foundation kind of resonates with that. So with that, I'd really love to kind of transition into talk a little bit more about the foundation and kind of your role in the foundation.
Sure.
So would you like to share some insight into how you see the foundation operating?
Yeah. So the foundation, has at its core, it is the custodian of the cash, from the initial offering and all of the significant appreciation that has happened since. That is its main function. Now, it also hosts a bunch of other functions which then interact more directly with the Tezos ecosystem. But at its core, the foundation is a Swiss foundation, and it's supervised by the Swiss Federal Foundation Supervisory Agency. And that is not a joke. This is a proper government agency with teeth and regulatory power that requires the foundation to be run to a certain standard. And it is, I would say that, in my experience of corporate governance, which is extensive, I think the foundation is actually governed very well. And I think at the top level, the council members, my fellow council members, Hubertus Tornhauser, Alexis Bonte, Lars Hausmann, Anil Modihabi-Pedi, Chris Wright, who's the CTO of Red Hat. I mean, this is a really talented group of people who have a lot of experience, and they are the elders, if you like, in this environment. Beneath that, you have an executive committee that's populated largely by people who've been hired in Switzerland, live in Switzerland, and work at the foundation, and they do a lot of the execution work. They do once a grant or an investment has been decided upon, they will execute it. When the auditors come in to audit the foundation, they will have to talk the auditors through the accounting system and the accounts. They'll manage the accounting team, they'll manage tax, they'll manage any incoming litigation. Fortunately, I think Tezos is pretty clear of litigation at the moment, but it has certainly been an issue in the past. So managing any kind of caseload that goes with that is with the executive. And then beneath that, you have a series of specific committees. So you're going to have the executive committee, as I just mentioned. You've got the technical advisory committee is very important. That's the committee that really decides on the technical merit of any grant. You have the nomination committee, which determines who is within each of the other committees. And then you have the remuneration committee, which decides on compensation for all the people in the network. So it's very well run. And again, I'm not, and I've seen there's a few questions on the technical basis. You look at people like Perry Metzger, who's, probably, and Anil and Chris, these guys are serious, software as a service technologists that know and love crypto and know and love Tezos. You're going to need to interview them when it comes to the technical questions, and to be honest, my role is to be there to make sure that when we're doing grants and when we're doing investments, that the proper oversight is being exercised, and the right people who understand those investments are looking at them. If it's an investment in a particular wallet software or something, of a technical nature, that the right people are looking at it. And if they say it's okay, I assume it's okay. I just need to make sure that the people that are actually looking at the technology itself seem to be competent, and I think they definitely are. So does that answer your question? I mean, that's pretty much how the foundation functions.
Yeah, definitely. That's some great insight there. And I think people generally pretty much, appreciate the degree of professionalism in the foundation. But I guess like for the community, it kind of goes hand in hand with high expectations in terms of how the money it's sitting on is deployed, right? So I guess a question people would really like to learn more about is whether there are plans to kind of try and to kind of try and make better the communication with the community.
Well, look, I mean, that there's sort of incoming and outgoing, right? So I know there's a lot of conversations going on between people who want investments and grants and various parts of the Tezos ecosystem. I mean, some of the companies I'm invested in or was invested in before I joined the Tezos Foundation had received funding from Tezos in the past. And so I've been a party to how that works. And, it's like applying for any grant. It's tough. You've got a lot of competition. There's limited bandwidth at the foundation. And it's tough to get one of these grants. And I know it must be frustrating for a lot of people that try, but it's a little bit like, American Idol. A lot of people go along and try and sing, but only so many of them get on the show at the end of the day. There's just only so many spaces. On the flip side, I think the foundation does a good job on a periodic basis. I've just been reviewing the draft of the semi-annual Tezos Foundation report, which is 50 pages long and details, 60 grants made in 25 countries, every single company that's been granted. I don't think every single amount is stated, but certainly by country and so on, it is determined. And so, I think that's an appropriate balance of how you communicate with the foundation, how the foundation communicates back to the community. I know there have sort of been calls in the past for some sort of community determined voting system on projects, and all I would tell you in that regard is, yeah, there are some that work like that. We just, for example, did an index product on the index co-op system. Our CGCI crypto and gold index is launching as a token in DeFi on that token sets / index co-op platform, and we went to the community for a vote on that. And what happened was the only other index that's on that system is the DeFi Pulse index, and the only people that voted against us were the DeFi Pulse index token holders, because they wanted to keep all the real estate on the index cooperative platform for themselves. Now, as it so happens, the community voted with us, but it becomes very parochial when you do that. And I think that the level of inspection on technical grants that's done by Perry Metzger and Chris Wright and Anil is so detailed that it would be almost impossible to publish all of the hundreds and hundreds of grantees that request funding and all of the detail of the grants that they want, a lot of which, by the way, is proprietary technology and that they wouldn't want in the public domain. So I think there is a good team evaluating these things. I'm sure it's disappointing for people that attempt and fail to get them, but I think that's done in an appropriate way. The only thing I've tried to change myself is this gets more complicated when it comes to investments. I think the foundation, frankly, in the past has made some investments that were unnecessary, and I think that what was lacking was two things. One, and they weren't massive. These were just flesh wounds, if you describe them that way. I think one, the foundation needs to be, and is becoming as we go forward, much more cognizant of hurdles along the way. Like, is this benefiting the Tezos ecosystem? That is front and center. And then what we're also trying to look at is, if we're going to give someone a grant, then let's maybe not give it a grant. Let's give it a loan and then if these hurdles are met, then that loan can become a grant. But you can't just take a loan and then go off and work on Cardano. And I think there's been a little bit of that stuff where once the money's in, the hurdles are not respected, and that's because the money's already there. We need to connect more, meeting these hurdles with actually making that money free, and we need to be more. I mean, I voted against and lobbied against a very big investment recently because I just didn't believe in it. From a commercial perspective, I didn't see how it really benefited Tezos, and I didn't even think that the project was, in as good a state as the sponsors claimed it was, and we didn't do that one. So those are the areas where we're sort of modulating the granting and investing process.
Yeah, and I appreciate you diving into that, but we have a ton of other questions from the chat, so
let's go.
I think we can just start going through the list. But someone asked, would the TF be open to the possibility of releasing funds to the community to control if a voting platform were implemented, allowing members with voting rights to gain a consensus on spending needs?
I presume you mean spending the money of the foundation.
Yeah.
Look, I think there could be a silo where that happens, right? And I would encourage the person who asked that question to put together a proposal and submit it to the foundation. And I don't think it's practical for all the foundation's capital to be community governed. It's just it is a monster piece of work for a big team of people, and it's practically not possible. But that doesn't mean for a subsection of those funds may be dedicated to particularly hot button topics that the community thinks are required, that couldn't be done. And I'd encourage the questioner to make that proposal.
Yeah, we have another kind of related question there, which is somebody's asking whether it's true that the Tezos Foundation wants to spend $100 million per year in development. I think this question kind of comes from a recent post on Twitter where
all I can tell, I think that's an inflated number, but it might not necessarily be wrong. I mean, I'll tell you what I think the foundation's basic dimension is. As we sit here today, and I'm probably saying something that's slightly ahead of published materials, but you can take a look at the Tezos assets from a quarter ago and see what's happened to crypto. Obviously, they've gone up a lot. So the foundation's probably $1.25 billion, that kind of range, I imagine right now. And I think what the foundation's general idea is that this foundation will support the ecosystem for 10 years. Now, that's 10 years, is that 10 years in nominal terms or 10 years in inflation adjusted terms? Doesn't really matter. But if you take $1.3 billion and divide it by 10, it's 130 million. Now that's a new thing because the market's gone up somewhat. Yeah, I mean, I think those are the kind of numbers that could be available. Now, if we'd had this conversation 6 months ago, that wouldn't have been the case. And there's a lot of conversation going on in the investment committee, which I sit on, about getting a new mandate. How much risk do we want to have? I mean, we've retained a lot of crypto, which has been great. But is it time to start looking at more interest yielding assets and stuff that will guarantee that cash flow can last for a decade and be significant and generate a yield, which could make case it could last even longer. But the way you look at it is just look at the assets and divide by 10, and that ought to be over time, the kind of general quantum of spend.
Yeah, so we have another question here. Someone was asking, will you launch a CoinShares ETN product for Tezos?
The answer is yes. I think we've already published that prospectus. If the CoinShares ETP programs are mostly out of Sweden, and we've had a lot of regulatory pushback there. Really, as our business has become a victim of its own success. When we had $15 million in the Bitcoin ETP in 2015, nobody cared. Now you have 4 billion, you become a very big dog in that dog park. So we've had to raise our game a lot in Sweden. where most of that stuff is issued. But we've had a lot of success in Switzerland, and I believe that the CoinShares Digital Securities prospectus, which is public, I believe it already has Tezos as an ETP, and it's just a question. We then, there's a sort of a boilerplate or rather a macro document that governs all the cryptos that we want to issue, and then each of those cryptos then has a set of final terms, like a term sheet, the short one, that then goes, and those things, we will roll out whatever's on our prospectus. I believe Tezos is on it. We'll roll them all out over the next 6 months or so.
Great. Yeah, speaking of CoinShares and perhaps its relations to Tezos, we have a question here, which is, are you limited by your work at CoinShares, like to actively promote Tezos on, for instance, social platforms?
Look, I feel like, Bitcoin is a movement, Ethereum is a movement. I almost feel like, when I talk about those things, I'm talking about not a specific crypto or a specific stock. I'm talking about the stock market, Now, if I start, shilling Solana or FTX or Filecoin or something, I think that's a very different story. I mean, I have put out information about, I put out a lot of stuff when I joined the Tezos Foundation. I was very proud to be nominated. But it does become tricky for me to start. For example, I really can't make price predictions about cryptos in the public domain. That starts to impact my kind of regulatory perimeter. So I don't tend to promote individual coins. We're involved in a lot of coin projects. We'll always say something once in a while about something, but you know what it's like on the crypto Twitter. The ardent tweeters are tweeting about their cryptocurrency every 5 minutes all day long. I'm more like, once a month.
Yeah, understood. But that kind of brings us to the topic of marketing, which I guess is a big one in the Tezos community. So somebody's asking whether the foundation is convinced that marketing is paramount, and like what will be done about it from now on. So are there any plans to when it comes to marketing?
Look, I have been a big proponent of the idea that Arthur becomes more prevalent in marketing. If you look at the crypto community and you look at somebody like Gavin Wood or Joe Lubin or Mike Novogratz or Dan Moorhead, there are people out there that speak. Now, the difference is that, some people speak to what I call inside baseball. The crypto, I interact with the crypto community, and the crypto community is the crypto community, but that is not the outside community. And just in terms of the coin itself, my feeling right now is that everyone within the crypto community, knows about Tezos, may own it, may think it's underperformed other coins, over the last few months, may have been unhappy with the governance issues around the foundation, but it's pretty well known, right? The people that are buying other crypto now, and that includes Bitcoin, but it also includes, the hot coins like Solana and Sushi and all these kind of things, don't come from crypto. They come from outside crypto. And I know that because I know a lot of these people. And so the marketing you need to do right now, if you want greater awareness and greater purchasing and adoption and ownership of Tezos coins, you actually need to do that outside the crypto community. And the only person I think that can really do that is Arthur. Arthur's an incredibly smart guy. He's a visionary. He has a great story. He's prevailed in a great struggle to get to where he is today. And I think it's a fascinating story that needs to be told. And, when I spoke to him about this, he's like, oh, I talk to the community. I'm on chats. I'm on this and I'm that. I'm like, sure you are, but you're not on CNBC. You're not in the Financial Times. You're not in the Wall Street Journal. That's the investor community that's driving crypto today. And so that is one area where I think the project as a whole could benefit enormously from Arthur's overt leadership. And I think we're in a position now as a Tezos community, and he is in a position personally now where he can do that, and that may not have been true in the past. So we're looking forward to that. The second thing I think is absolutely essential is is marketing around the Tezos use case and the sort of thing that TQ Tezos does, the business development side. I think what the business community needs to understand is, what does blockchain do for me? I think they need a simple tear sheet that says, I'm in the shoe business, I'm in the ag business, I'm in the shipping business, right? I'm going to give you a tear sheet that says, here's what you used to do, here's how blockchain makes it better. Company we're invested in called Aventus that do focusing actually now on ag tech companies. And they're doing things like showing ag companies that when they make a purchase, that they can tokenize the freight component in a ship or a barge or a truck, and that when a small consumer wants to buy a good, they can buy a token, which is actually the freight. They can buy the good as a token, they can buy the freight as a token, so they buy the 2 tokens and they get their goods delivered. And they do that on a layer 2 blockchain solution, which is sort of fast and cheap. And that makes a lot of sense to me, right? So I think the other side of marketing is not, R for the project. It's, let's do 100 use cases where just give me that tear sheet that says, here's how you used to do it, here's how you do it better, and put it out there. Don't put it on Twitter. No one's reading that. Put it out in trade press, put it out in trade conferences, start explaining to real world people how blockchain makes their business better. It's doable. A lot of companies do it very well. And that, I think, is a big marketing area where Tezos needs to step up.
Yeah, that's a very interesting perspective on that. And I agree with you about Arthur. Kind of on that same topic, though, we had another question that was asked: how does the TF plan to deploy their significant pool of capital over the next few years?
Well, it's sort of offense and defense. In our investment mandate, which we're trying to revise at the moment to meet current times, I think there are to be revised, but there are a couple of things. We need liquidity, because there are ongoing commitments to both the cost of running the machine, which is Tezos and all the affiliates, and to meet granting obligations and funding and secondary funding and so on. We need crypto, because we're a crypto organization and we're always going to have crypto. There's a big question around how much crypto. Arthur makes a very, very good point about, look, if Bitcoin goes to 500,000, you've kind of got to have some in the foundation, because Bitcoin dominance will be so high at that point that it would probably damage every other project that isn't Bitcoin. And I take that point. But we've also got to think about, investments of a stable kind. We don't want all of our money in Tezos and Bitcoin and Ethereum. So we have some slices. I don't know if they're disclosed in the prospectus, in the report. They probably are. But you'll see, the stable part of the portfolio, which is invested, and that's invested in, traditional type of investment, stocks and bonds and so on, various ETFs. So you've got those 3 components, right? You've got cash that you need to fund everything real time. You've got a stable investment portfolio that kind of should have a year of liquidity. In a year you can get a liquidity for that year, and then the crypto part, which is, I believe, still by far the biggest, in which we're doing very well.
Yeah, speaking about marketing a little more here, apart from Arthur, do you feel that there's is there anyone in the Tezos Foundation who's specifically responsible for marketing at this point? And if not, who should be in our ecosystem if it's not just Arthur?
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, Arthur is the spirit. Well, Arthur and Kathleen, they are the spirit animals of Tezos. Let's face it. They're the smartest guys in the room. They're the visionaries. They're the founders. They're the ones that have really, stuck it through a lot of trolling, a lot of legal problems, a lot of issues, a lot of work, and they've stuck it through. And I look back, I remember refer people to the Wired magazine article about Kathleen and Arthur that came out after they had, retaken control of the foundation from Johan Gavers. I just thought that was a great article. I thought the punchline at the end, referring to the bad actors as having fucked with the wrong geeks, just summed it up. I mean, I think they were out of their comfort zone, but their intelligence was such that they managed to navigate their way successfully through it. And I was very, very impressed with that. And it's that kind of article, front page of Wired magazine. Arthur, Kathleen, maybe there's a few other people out there that would be in that same. Maybe Perry Metzger, maybe Alison Mongeri, maybe Anil, maybe Chris Wright, depending on his conflicts and so on. There are a number of, heads that could be out there. And I compare this to CoinShares. We at CoinShares, we have a voice, and we compare our voice as asset managers with that of Pantera and Grayscale and various other competitors. And we get 33% of the global voice. So if you add up all the articles, all the clicks, all the magazines, all the interviews, all the TV and stuff, we get like 30% a day or a month or a week. And I think that's what Tezos should be looking to do. And that Wired magazine article was exactly the right kind of article. It's just, it was a one-off, that it's that kind of stuff. And the people that are associated. So for CoinShares, it could be me, it could be Jean-Marie Mognetti, who's the CEO. It could be Melton Tamiras, Chief Strategy Officer. It could be Frank Spiteri, who's our Chief Revenue Officer. It could be James Butterfield, who's our head researcher. It could be any one of those guys. But, you just got to get out there and you've got to talk about what you're doing on a regular basis. And, we'll meet frequently and talk about, what is the message we're trying to get out this week? We need to continue to communicate. So there's got to be more of it, and we've got to decide who the champions are. It can't just be random people. There's got to be people that tell the Tezos story on a regular basis.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I like that Wired magazine article too. And yeah, I don't know if you remember it, but there were actually a couple of good ones from Breaker Mag around the same time. But
I didn't see that.
Yeah, maybe we'll post that somewhere here at some point. But another question from the audience. Sure. Someone asked, where does Tezos fit in the crypto ecosystem? Do you crypto?
Yeah, well, look, that is I think that you got to think about what is crypto to start with, and I think people confuse this very, very, very much. I mean, the number of times I've been assaulted over, from the traditional finance community about the worthlessness of Bitcoin or the uselessness of Ethereum and so on. Look, for me, crypto networks are utilities, right? People can understand the idea that if I build a bridge, I can charge you to drive over it in your car, but they somehow can't understand if I build an electronic network that sends a piece of unique information to someone, I can charge for that too. But that's what they are, they're utilities. And, utilities are, in the real world, whether it's railroads, pipelines, electricity grids, all those kind of things. What are they? There are people that do a certain thing. I move oil products in my pipeline. I move crude oil in my pipeline. I move, heavy tar sand oil in my pipeline from Canada. There are different types of utilities, and I think there are different types of blockchains. And then there is geographical preference. AT&T may be just as easy to function in Asia as it is in America, but in America it's a household name, and it's probably always going to sell better in America. So Tezos, Tezos is a great piece of architecture. It's a great utility. It is a shining utility that, pipeline, transmission grid, whatever, that doesn't have enough usage right now. And there you have Ethereum, which may not even be as good as Tezos. We moved a liquidity pool the other day in our gold token, WDGLD. We moved it from USDC to ETH to back the new index token we're taking out, and the gas cost was $1,500 on a $400,000 pool, right? I mean, that's not manageable. So it's come to the point. I mean, I was doing a move on Binance the other night, and I could move. The gas cost on ERC20 was $28. I could have done it on Binance chain for 12 cents. So we're starting to see competitive pricing happen on these blockchains. And that's where, Tezos has to step into, because it's quality. It's not like someone didn't knock this up last week. It's a quality blockchain, and the opportunity is there. And the opportunity is there because the Ethereum blockchain is overcrowded and DeFi is out of control. If you look at Dexter, the DeFi platform, I think it's a very clean, very effective looking platform. It just doesn't have enough traffic on it. So we have to consider the task of converting people from an extremely expensive but very ubiquitous Ethereum, an expensive Ethereum network, to a very highly functioning, arguably better, much cheaper, but much less well-known Tezos ecosystem.
Yeah, this kind of brings us to an exciting topic, because like speaking of Tezos versus other like layer ones, I'm pretty sure we've all experienced these architectural shortcomings you've been talking about, like these high costs on Ethereum. So I feel like there's a lot of enthusiasm in Tezos about like the rise of Tezos DeFi, and I'd love to hear more about what you think about, like, given that we have things like Dexter, there's QuickSwap on the rise, we have Bender Labs who's coming out with a product, we've got Colibri, like there's a lot of components that are basically alive or in the making. So how do you feel like about the current the status quo of DeFi on Tezos?
It's underwhelming, I mean, I've done a couple of small transactions on Dexter. I've done a ton of stuff on Uniswap and SushiSwap. It makes me cringe when I look at Uniswap and I look at the slippage and I look at the cost and I look at the gas and all this kind of stuff. It really makes me cringe, but it's kind of the only show in town, so you do it. I just, the goal is people need to know what the alternative is. And I personally think that one of the things the Tezos Foundation should do is start to subscribe assets to the DeFi platform, create pools. And I think that may be happening actually, but create pools and tokenize assets and create pools and make that happen. Go through the list of grantees, go through the list of investments and say, look, you've received this grant, you've received this development, whatever, you've received this investment, or we know you and you can do this kind of stuff. Please go tokenize this stuff and put it on that network. I mean, the default right now is, you issue your ERC20 token, you link it to whatever you link it to, utility or an asset of some kind, and you list it on Uniswap and you're done. And that's all great. Like, the issuance process has become very easy in that regard. It's not like 2017 when you had to go beg CZ to, give them $1 million to put your token onto Binance. Now you can do this a different way. So that, that's a great thing. But when you do it in that way, it is extremely expensive, both in slippage terms and gas terms. So somehow it's a classic case of, there's a better and cheaper technology. You just have to go compete with the incumbents and steal customers. I mean, there are lots of case studies in the past about people having better and cheaper services. Netflix did this to Blockbuster. Go figure that out. How did Netflix get all of Blockbuster's customers? Because they had a better, cheaper service, but they did it. And that's what, Tezos has a good shot at doing that with DeFi, and the window of that is now.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. At this point, though, I think it's a good time to go ahead and announce our keyword for the Ledger Nano S giveaway. And that keyword is Edo. So be sure to comment that in the chat, and we will be announcing a winner here shortly. But I guess to kind of circle back to DeFi, Daniel, we had another question. Someone asked, what do you think is the most promising and upcoming application on Tezos?
Look, I'd like to see. I think there's two things I'd like to see on DeFi, which both exist, in the Ethereum world. One, I would like to see some gold on the Tezos DeFi, and I know that a lot of crypto people throw up in their own mouths, when you say the word gold. But gold is important for two reasons. One, it is arguably a stable coin that exists outside the banking system. Ours certainly does. And that may not be important today, but I'm always fearful that these US dollar stable coins, particularly Tether, are going to face some, nasty regulatory surprise, at which point you want stable coin, but you don't want it necessarily linked to dollars. So I think that's one reason for having gold. I think the second reason for having gold is gold as a real world asset lends itself very well to tokenization because it's kind of a very clean asset. It's not a security. You can do it as not a security. It doesn't pay any cash flow. It's a simple thing, and gold kind of has a special treatment legally where it's easier to deal with than, for example, even platinum or palladium, base metals, and certainly easier than sort of oil and stuff like that. So gold is kind of a starter kit for getting real assets tokenized. And I think getting real assets tokenized is really important. So you start with something simple, and then maybe you do some real estate, or you do some bonds, or you do some cash flowing instruments and so on. But I think you start easy, and gold is easy. So do some gold. The second thing I'd like to see, to me, one of the biggest killer apps on DeFi really has been compound finance. And when you look at what Celsius do, and BlockFi do, and Nexo do, I don't know what they have between them now, $10-12 billion in borrow and lend. But it's all kind of like, documents and OTC, and look, I like that. It's good. We're actually putting our gold token on Celsius next week. But Compound sort of automates this whole thing and puts it all on chain. And I think that is the driverless banking feature of the future. So I think the Tezos ecosystem, to be honest, I don't even know, I'm not really a technologist, let's be honest. I don't even know if someone's doing this application. If they are doing it, I'd like to know. But I'd like to see something like compound finance on Tezos, whether it's compound finance itself or someone that does what compound finance does.
Yeah, thanks for sharing your thoughts on this, Daniel. So before we wrap up and to get to the last question here, I'd like to announce that we have a winner for the Tezos branded ledger giveaway, which is who is Colin. So Colin, we will be in touch, and you'll receive your ledger. And we have one more question that I'd like to ask you, Daniel, which is a question related to the TF strategy in terms of baking. So somebody wants to know whether you could shed some light on the future plans of the TF on their baking activity.
Not an area of my keenest expertise, but from what I know, I think all of the foundation Tezos is being baked, and I think that's just a blanket policy. I don't really know what else. What is the policy on baking? I don't know what the policy on baking is.
Right. Were there any other questions, or do you think we're good?
No, I think we asked most of them. I guess if we want to close out with one more, there was a question earlier. Someone asked, how do you see the current Tezos market situation based on your prior experience in institutional finance?
You mean the price of Tezos?
The current market situation.
Well, by current market situation, I think probably people are talking about valuation. I think Tezos are cheap. I really do. I think over time we're going to see the cream rise to the top when it comes to blockchain architecture. There's a lot of stuff that's been spun up in the last year or so. Chains I've never heard of before, probably forks of some other chains. We saw this back in the day. I won't use any names because I'll just get trolled, but a bunch of fake chains that really, were very hyped in 2017 and didn't go anywhere. But the chains that are really good, like Bitcoin, like Ethereum, like Polkadot, like Tezos, they've done, they've stuck around and they've done, either very well or partly well. And I think to be perfectly honest, Tezos suffers from two things. It suffers from, some of the legacy governance and legal issues that I think are gone, but I don't think the market perceives them as gone because the market's got so much other stuff to look at. I mean, I probably wouldn't know unless I was working with the Tezos Foundation because I've got other stuff to look at, right? But so I think people may have dismissed it in the past and it's gone. And that's not a factor. I think they underestimate what the buying power of the Tezos Foundation is. I mean, the Bitcoin core has had its hands out recently to institutional investors, like through the MIT cryptocurrency initiative, to get funding for core developers. Well, that's not an issue for Tezos. Tezos has got plenty of funding. So it's a quality blockchain with a lot of funding, with not much traffic, and that traffic has to be sought, but there is no reason why that cannot happen. And so when you compare it in network value to some of the bigger networks, I think it's quite a good value and overlooked asset at the moment in price terms.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing your insight on that. Well, we are out of questions, so I think now is a good time for us to go ahead and wrap up. Daniel, we thank you for coming on today and taking the time to answer all these questions.
You're very, very welcome. Enjoy the chat.
All right. Did you have anything else you'd like to add before we go ahead and wrap up?
No, look, I think I'll say one thing. I don't know, the Tezos community as well as I might, on the basis that, I have, my attention is drawn in a lot of other directions. But I do know a lot of the operators within the Tezos network itself, both some of the investee companies, the executive committee, the board, the TQ Tezos, and I'm getting to know, more parts as we go along. And I've dealt with a lot of organizations, and I do deal with a lot of organizations on a regular basis. It's a good organization. It is learn, the measure of an organization is it learns from its history. No one that pops up, 2 weeks ago is any good. But they've had some history, they've had some experience, they've been around a long time in crypto years. And I think the Tezos community and all the people that work with it, in the grantees, in the tech groups, in the marketing groups, in the foundation, I think everyone should actually give themselves a little pat on the back, because in my experience and my oversight and perspective on what's going on in digital assets, I think it's a lot better than people think.
Yeah, thank you very much, Danny, for the insight. And we're wishing everybody a great day. It's been a good show, and see you for the next episode of TezTalks.